Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening once again, and thank you for joining us for this Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather. On the advisory warning map, we've got nothing here, no advisories, watches, or warnings for all of the interior. But the greater Juneau area in Douglas, there's a high wind warning out for tonight until about 10 p.m. tomorrow morning. And that's for those northeast winds to gust to 70 miles per hour. And up the Klondike Highway, look for wind chills to run 30 to 40 degrees below zero, especially up toward White Pass. Otherwise, satellite imagery showing a lot of clear skies here across the southeast coast, Gulf of Alaska. A little bit of cloudiness right in here, but basically this is all clear here. Storm down to the south, clouds ahead of a front there and across the Queen Charlotte's. And then some moisture here coming over the top of that big area of high pressure along the Arctic coast, and some of that slipping southeast and then westward here underneath that high, just kind of mid and high level stuff. Were some patchy areas, low clouds and fog along the Aleutian Range up toward Iliamna earlier today, and a little bit of cloudiness right through here. Otherwise, that's about it. Even dry conditions all the way out to the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula clearing, and then this frontal boundary right through here bringing rain to Adak and Atka, but not much in the way of wind associated with that. And this really isn't going to move a whole lot for the next couple of days, at least through tomorrow there. And this system down to the south actually it'll just stay to the south. Strong high pressure over the Yukon, tight gradient there. Again, the wind warning back in effect tonight for the Juneau area, and those low wind chills right up to False Pass. Pretty windy conditions all the way down there into Clarence Strait, but cold air and the high pressure over Canada, that's going to keep this moisture down to the south and really won't allow it to come much farther north, other than maybe a few clouds in the extreme south. No change over the interior tonight. Winds pretty light through the entire area, all the way up to the Arctic coast. Maybe a few flurries up there today. Let me bounce on to tonight. There we go for tonight. A frontal system over the Arctic will keep most of the snow north of the coast, but there'll be some skiffs of snow from Barrow eastward tonight, but nothing significant at all. And again, no change here over the interior. Strong high pressure, slowly weakening though, but holding fast up over the northern interior, down into the Yukon. And again, still a lot of lines here, pretty tight gradient across the southeast coast. And again, that high pressure, that's going to keep that frontal boundary down to the south. Pick up some clouds, look for an increase in the clouds here over the eastern Bering Sea, with a little bit of moisture starting to develop now over the eastern Aleutians, but the main area back with this front here holding right over the Adak-Atka area. So periods of rain, fog, or just showers, but nothing heavy. That band becoming narrower and weaker with time and drying out back to the west. A little chillier air could bring some snow showers into the Shimia area, but most of that action will stay even west of there. Otherwise, again, clouds across St. Lawrence Island, through the Bering Strait, Chukchi Sea, variably cloudy, especially on the western Arctic coast there. And then for tomorrow, we'll see that system drags a front across the eastern Arctic coast, and that'll tighten the gradient up enough due to this high over the interior holding fast. Probably get back into the gales there on the eastern Arctic coast with blowing snow, Kaktovik and Barter Island. Maybe some flurries down the east side there. Possibly as far west as Barrow, but nothing significant. Maybe a few flurries over the north slope. Otherwise, mostly cloudy north of the Brooks Range. South of the Brooks Range, again, just light winds and clear skies with temperatures staying below zero much of the day, especially over the interior areas. Coldest in the east there down to the Copper River Basin. And a day much like today here for south central Alaska, North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, with pretty light wind conditions, even in the Gulf of Alaska here with that high center down to the south a little bit there. Staying pretty cloud-free here, Kodiak Island, Alaska Peninsula along the North Gulf Coast, but starting to increase some clouds out in this area underneath that high with the stability that's going on with that. And back out to the west, again, just some light, possibly mixed precipitation. Definitely probably rain in the lower elevations. That'll extend up just grazing the Pribilofs, and that rain area still out here over the central Aleutians. And then for Tuesday, this system drops southeastward, and another front approaches the Arctic there, the western Arctic coast and the Chukchi Sea. So I'll bring a chance of snow in toward Point Hope and Cape Lisburne, but the bulk of the snow will be back with the front itself, and light snow at that. Look for those southwest winds to increase 20, maybe 25 knots. Currently carrying 20 knots here in the marine forecast for the western Arctic coast. Light winds on the east side there with more clearing. Another clear day, although the high center slipping off over the Yukon. We're actually kind of just dissolving here over the interior, and even the one over the Yukon weakening there quite a bit. And with this other system gone to the southeast, a lot less wind here will be the rule across the panhandle there, but it'll still be dry and mostly clear along the North Gulf Coast, but an increase in the clouds here over the Gulf of Alaska. Some of that will probably push in along the west side of Kodiak Island. Otherwise, clear skies. Could be some patchy low clouds and fog, especially around Cook Inlet on Tuesday, Monday night and Tuesday. Otherwise, start picking up the clouds here as you head west, but dry conditions all the way out to the coast. Maybe a few light snow showers for the Seward Peninsula, St. Lawrence Island, kind of a weak trough coming out in advance of this front right through here, but quite weak. Otherwise, the Bering Sea, mostly cloudy now, areas of IFR, and good possibility of that along the Alaska Peninsula, the high down here to the south, circulating moisture up to the northwest, and that just kind of spreads and rides eastward across the Aleutians and the Bering during the day on Tuesday. And that same weather pattern, easterly winds 15 to 25 knots from the eastern Aleutians here all the way out to Shimia. So a really general uniform weather pattern going on out there. This front Tuesday night and Wednesday, this thing will drop right into the interior as the whole weather pattern shifts around. Now we have the dominating high pressure out over the Bering Sea, and that's going to allow a really cold air mass to drop in over the interior middle and latter part of next week. For temperatures today, not too bad here across the Panhandle. 40 degrees at Sitka, 38 at Klawock, with 43 recorded at Metlakatla, 31 at Petersburg. Juneau had 27, and Hoonah 36, just 19 with strong north winds there at Skagway. Below zero, Copper River Basin, McCarthy and Gulkana, Gunsight up to 17, Valdez 36, Whittier up to 40, 27, Seward 24 over Cordova, and Homer 34 degrees, just 8 at Kenai, and -2 at Willow, but Talkeeton up to 25, -22 at Tok, 16 below there at Fairbanks, and Tanana -25. About the same temperature also in Bettles there in the Koyukuk Valley, but -6 for Yukon. Arctic Village -3. And then again, the Arctic coast into the 20s. 25 there at Wainwright, 23 over at Dead Horse, 19 at Point Lay. And then single numbers and teens here for the northwest. That one at Kotzebue, -4 at Selawik, 5 below at Ambler, 21 Tin City, and a 27 out there at Savunga. Otherwise, Nome had 15, and below zero conditions here right down the Yukon and Kuskokwim River Valley from -17 at McGrath, 29 above at Bethel, 18 St. Mary's Airport, and a 16 at Unalakleet, 17 out at Macoriac. And the Pribilofs, mid to upper 30s this afternoon, 40 on Alaska, upper 30s for the remainder of the Aleutians, and mid to upper 30s through the Alaska Peninsula, and then cooling off quite significantly as you head northeast. For the lows tonight, minus teens, -15 to -35 here, Yukon Flats, down in across the eastern Tanana Valley, and minus 20s here for the Copper River Basin. And again, anywhere from 10 below to 10 above here for south central Alaska, though milder along the coast, especially Prince William Sound, 28 Kodiak, 20s and 30s in the Alaska Peninsula, teens on the western Arctic coast, and a pretty chilly night here over the southeast coast again, with temperatures dropping down 10 to 20, but staying in the mid to upper 20s, Sitka on down across Prince of Wales Island. And for tomorrow, all highs looking in the 20s here, again, mid-30s out along the coast, 33 for Yakutat, below zero, coldest here, eastern interior, Copper River Basin northward to the Berks Range, and 0 to 10 below out to the west, and then warming into the mid-20s there for the Seward Peninsula, mid-30s St. Lawrence Island, Pribilofs, near 40 for the Aleutians. And again, tomorrow and maybe the next day, you're going to still see highs in the 20s here over the Arctic coast, but after that, that's going to be it. And then for flying weather late tonight, marginal VFR again, just grazing, skirting the central and eastern Arctic coast back to the west, IFR possible into the Bering Strait, and also forming here from St. Matthew Island, west of Nunivak Island, down toward the Pribilofs with marginal VFR for the eastern Aleutians. And then for tomorrow afternoon, we've got some marginal VFR in the forecast actually, which means those clouds might roll in. Well, obviously they would here if that does develop there for Kodiak Island and up across the Barrens, but should stay off the coast here for the North Gulf Coast and the Panhandle through tomorrow. Now we've got a swath of IFR over the eastern Bering Sea, marginal conditions down to the Alaska Peninsula, really not too bad over the Aleutians. IFR, best threat, Barrow area, otherwise areas where it's marginal. And for passes, again, all open for the Brooks Range, Anatuvik and Anagan, good VFR, Lake Clark, Merrill and Rainy, Sealing's visibility is unlimited for those three passes, as well as windy, Isabel and Mintasta, with Tanita wide open, VFR, clear skies for Portage, and Chilkoot and White once again. Freezing levels, again, high pressure aloft through tonight. This for about 3 a.m. tomorrow morning, so we've got 4,000 to 6,000 feet here over the western interior, dropping off to the east and also to the west. And this whole pattern is going to change significantly throughout the upcoming week. And for the icing, none to speak of any significance, or actually none at all here for much interior Alaska, the Panhandle. Possibly some, this would be the best chance of seeing any light rime icing, if it occurs at all, would be in that shaded area from Nikolsky to Adak. Looking at the winds aloft, again, strong upper ridge holding over west central Alaska, and the jet up well to the west, northwest, 120 knots, still north of the Arctic coast into Canada. Northeasterly, still cutting across the Panhandle. They're going to keep those winds in at least tonight and through a portion of tomorrow. And 9,000 feet, same pattern, high pressure there just east of Norton Sound. Light winds really on the east side of that, just 5 to 15 knots, kicking up to 30 knots on the eastern Arctic coast. Light southerlies here, the Bering Strait and the eastern Bering Sea down to the Aleutians, where they become kind of easterly at 20 to 25, and 30 knot winds still blowing across the northern and central southeast coast. 3,000 foot winds, those are more in the 20 to 25 knot range. Light here, southern Alaska, all these high centers. Light winds through all of the interior, except the eastern Arctic coast up there, 35 knots. Eastern Bering Sea, pretty light winds, just south 10 through the central areas, and then 20 knots out of the east here for a portion of the Aleutians. And moving on to turbulence, really not a whole lot. Looks pretty smooth. Bering Sea, Aleutian chain, up to Kodiak, all in the interior, smooth, and then less turbulence for the Panhandle, kind of diminishing by tomorrow afternoon, coming down to, I'd say, light to isolated moderate chop there, below about 5,000 feet, and then some turbulence possible along the eastern Arctic coast with those stronger winds. And after the break of the segment, I'll be back with a look at the marine forecast.
Welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service, and joining us today, two more people to talk about the augmented reality sandbox. It's Alana Valaji. She's a University of Alaska Fairbanks mechanical engineering student, helped design and work on the details to make this new type of sandbox there. Thanks for joining us, Alana.
Thanks.
And Courtney Breest, she's the outreach coordinator for AKwx, which is the experimental program to stimulate competitive research. It's a program funded nationally by the National Science Foundation, right?
Yes.
Okay. Alana, tell us about how you changed and adapted this version of the augmented reality sandbox. It's a really cool tool.
So Gina approached us with 3 goals for this new version of the sandbox. They wanted it to be compact and a light system that could travel around the state. They wanted it to be child-oriented, so we designed the sandbox to have 3 different levels.
Okay.
It's pretty cool. You can have younger children, you can have high school kids. I guess I should say high school teenagers.
Sure.
And then we also designed it to be more marketable, user-friendly, so that this could be seen eventually in classrooms all over the place, all over the state.
Okay. And you had a big hand in this, but this was a team approach, right?
Definitely. It was a really good experience for myself, for George Stevens, who we'll see later.
One of our hand models today. Yeah.
For 2 other members who aren't here today, Cody Klingman and Austin Hunt. And it was just a really good learning experience all around.
Very good. And this is something that is part of your learning experience as well, so you get to check a box in your education.
Yeah,
right?
it's a requirement for seniors of mechanical engineering at University of Alaska Fairbanks.
Very good. Very good. Well, it is a wonderfully inquisitive tool, fun to play with, and I hope to get my hands in the sand here in just a little bit. But it's also part of a bigger program, something that we were talking about a moment ago, AKwx, and that's what Courtney is here to tell us more about. What is AKwx and why do you need a sandbox?
Well, AKwx, as you mentioned, is a national program. We're funded nationally, but we're actually located statewide. We're at UAF, we're at UAA, we're in Southeast at UAS. And she mentioned, taking the sandbox as an educational tool, and that's where I'm an outreach coordinator for the South Central test case.
Okay.
Our focus is on the Kenai watershed, and we are really interested in using these tools like the sandbox to interact with the students down there and get them interested in STEM and also communicate the research findings that we've been having throughout the state.
Okay. And one of those, as George and Eric are kind of changing the contours for us there from UAF to maybe something that resembles a little bit of something more of the Kenai watershed, which is one of your focuses for the study, right? And specifically looking at some of the changes there and how that impacts people and also the salmon.
Yes, it is all of our research is social and environmental.
Okay.
So we have social scientists working hand in hand with our environmental scientists. One of the things we're studying is Upper Russian Lake, and we have a researcher taking sediment cores from that lake. So one of the things we're going to use the sandbox to communicate is how the landscape changed over a long period of time, thousands of years, going from glacier, covered by glacier ice, to being filled with water. And then
And that's what they're doing right now.
Exactly. So
live.
Exactly. So they're
So
moving
cool.
the water around. And then I think they've got some props over there, because we're also going to go a little bit more in depth and explain how the salmon got there.
Okay.
So using
And there's
these,
the salmon.
exactly. Oh, I think there's a few more.
Yeah, we like more salmon in Alaska. More salmon.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really taking the findings from our research grant and just trying to connect with the community and translate it in a really hands-on and exciting way, so people can, interact with us as much as possible.
Well, sure. That makes the learning and the science real and quite literally in your face, rather than just some boring black and white paper that you have to read about. This is something that people can understand better because it's visual and they're touching and feeling and seeing these changes, right?
Yeah, and get them engaged. And then outreach is a huge component, and working with the younger students, and actually even, working with the UAF graduate and engineering students it's a huge part of our grant, and we really enjoy it.
Oh, it is wonderfully exciting. And so, Alana, you were telling us that this is built to travel.
Right.
And this is built to do more things than version 1. Where can this type of project go in Alaska? And what can it demonstrate?
We were hoping to eventually get to villages that were harder to reach, that you couldn't necessarily move a whole fixed instrument to, right? You need something that can pack up, fit in your truck bed. One of the most attractive parts of this project is that this was going to be something that was used past our graduation point. This is going to be something that lives in the state for years.
Right. Right. Well, it looks like you're well on your way with that. So give me another example. What else can this show us? We've talked about the Kenai River watershed. What's the coolest thing that you've played in the sand with? What's your idea?
Well, I definitely enjoy the props, but we also like kind of building up a giant mound, and if you put some water behind it, you can make a little runway, I guess, and demonstrate the effects of the hydrology by just putting up a dam and letting it all pour right down.
Okay.
And so that could, I think you mentioned it earlier, you could even demonstrate the effects of a tsunami.
Right.
Or something along those lines.
So it's not just topography, but it's also hydrology
Yes.
and coastal surge mapping and some of the coastal changes that we're seeing here in Alaska, and seeing what the smaller changes in the sandbox might do to kind of a real effect of a slosh or a push of water up on the coast. Tsunami inundation mapping, or even glacial dam release, as some has been demonstrated before.
Yep.
So wow, that's just an impressive thing. That it seems like the possibilities are nearly endless with this, and probably even more ideas that are popping up in your head too.
Yeah, as we speak.
Very cool. All right. Well, if folks want to get more information about AKwx, you guys are online. You're on Facebook, Twitter, and on YouTube. AKwx, right? AKwx, Alaska AKwx, that is. And again, you guys are funded by the National Science Foundation,
Yes,
so
sir.
more to come from that, and a longer term study there. Thank you, ladies, for joining us today. Congratulations on your hard work there. This is really fun. And for now, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with this edition of Alaska Weather Facts, and I'm going to go play in the sandbox there. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back. Well, there's been a gradual increase in the sea ice this weekend from Bristol Bay up along the southwest coast to Norton Sound here, and not so much from St. Lawrence Island up into the Bering Strait, but that's going to change by Wednesday and beyond. There's going to be some serious cold air coming down into the northern Bering Sea and eventually pushing southward, so that will rapidly increase the ice late next week. On for the marine forecast, still gales along the coast, northeast 35 to 40 knots, 45 knot winds for Lynn Canal, 35 for Stevens Passage, northeast 25 for Clarence Strait. And then lose the gradient, those winds really come down just north of 20 now for northern Lynn Canal. 20 knot winds out of the north predominantly all the way down toward Dixon Entrance, and now really light winds out along the coast, just 10 to 15 knots with 5 to 6 foot seas. And for Cook Inlet, variable to northeast, really light, just 5 knots, so really no wind day coming up tomorrow. Prince William Sound, northeast maybe 10, and light winds all the way down to Kamishak Bay, Shelikof Strait, 10 knot winds, Kodiak Island and the Barrens, as well as the North Gulf Coast with seas 5 feet. And for Tuesday, westerlies 10 to 15 here for Kodiak Island. Northwest winds for Kamishak Bay at 15 knots, turn westerly across the Barrens. And then that light wind from the west at 10 for the North Gulf Coast with 5 foot seas again. Light winds, Prince William Sound, light winds for Cook Inlet. Bristol Bay east at 10 tomorrow. Otherwise, light winds for the Alaska Peninsula, and also from all the way up to Sitkinak, just 10 knots from the northeast. And then for Tuesday, change the direction around a little bit there. South 10 knots here on the Pacific side of the peninsula. That becomes southwest at about 15 from Castle Cape to Sitkinak. Otherwise, light east-northeasterlies for Bristol Bay. And for the Fox Islands tomorrow, east-southeast, 10 to 15 knots here for that area. And then 20 to 25 for the Adak-Atka region, and then kind of getting lighter and more variable on out to the west. And then for Tuesday, a really uniform wind pattern now, all easterly, 20 knots here from the far western Aleutians all the way up, and then diminishing across the Fox Islands down to 10 knots with the lightest winds across Unalaska Island, seas running 6 to 10 feet. And for the southwest coast, east to northeast at 10 knots, pretty light there. Southeast 10 for St. Lawrence Island, 15 knots here west of St. Matthew Island, light winds for the Pribilofs, and then northeast at about 15 there for the St. Paul, St. George area. And still light winds here along the coast, kind of going west there as that next front begins to drop down to the north, but staying light for St. Lawrence Island, northwest 10 for the areas north of Nunivak Island. And for the Arctic coast for tomorrow, we've got west winds 20 knots on the central coast, brisk wind advisories there as you head east, and then those turn into gales on that far eastern zone there, the demarcation point right out of the west. Southwest 20 for the west side, turning south and then diminishing to 15 knots across the Chukchi Sea down toward Wales. And then for the next day, just light winds here for the Chukchi Sea, southwest 20, all the way up the west side there, dropping back to 15 for the central coast, and now much lighter wind conditions on the east side with winds down to about 10 knots from the southwest. And for tonight, again, this front all going by to the north, but some light snow could reach the central and eastern Arctic coast, but it'd be just flurries, maybe some patchy fog. No change over the interior, mostly clear skies, lows 25 to 35 below in the east, not so far below zero in the west, and then much milder out over the Bering Sea. High wind warning tonight through 10 a.m. tomorrow for the Juneau-Douglas area for gusts of 70 miles per hour, so a little bit of an increase in the wind expected there, with wind chills up the Klondike Highway to White Pass running 30 to 40 degrees below zero, but dry conditions all the way down to Dixon Entrance. Weak front out west here really doesn't do much except kind of remain a stationary status quo there over the central Aleutians. Look for an increase in the clouds, a little bit of moisture over the eastern Bering Sea. Light winds, high pressure continue for Monday. And winds coming down tomorrow afternoon here for the southeast coast, and that trend continues tomorrow night and into Tuesday. And clear skies for the most part, definitely dry, but a lot less wind, no wind over the interior. Start to pick those southwesterlies up late in the day on Tuesday for the western Arctic coast with probably some snow moving in. Otherwise, more clouds over the Bering Sea with a little bit of moisture, but nothing heavy, and the winds certainly remaining light. Well, let's look at the weather for tonight. Thanks.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
I think the Vietnam War drove a stake right into the heart of America. Unfortunately, we've never moved really far away from that, and we never recovered.
There was no way we could avoid telling this story. Wars are so extraordinarily revealing, obviously, of the worst of humanity, but as it turns out, also the best of humanity.